Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
Welcome to Plain Talk. In a moment, we're going to talk about it's something interesting that's happened in the gubernatorial race where the one side, I'm talking about the Republican gubernatorial primary, one side of that race, Lieutenant Governor Tammy Miller, she had some people making some comments about lawyers that some lawyers have taken exception to. And while you're listening to this, I want you all to think about your favorite lawyer joke because we all have a sense of humor about this stuff. But it is, I think, an important thing to talk about. We're going to talk with a couple of guests about that here in just a moment. Also, coming up later in the show, we're going to have Jason Bohrer on from the North Dakota Lignite Energy Council. The North Dakota Republican Party had, everybody thought, passed a resolution at their state convention condemning carbon capture. And the resolution actually refers to it as fascism. But then after a recount, it turns out the resolution didn't pass after all. So some interesting things happening there. But also, the coal industry has an interesting take on this, where we have this very controversial pipeline that's been proposed, and a lot of people have a lot of very strong feelings about it. And the coal industry is saying, listen, don't let your feelings about that project color your feelings about carbon capture in general. Anyway, we're going to talk with him about that in a little bit. But now we're going to talk with Tatum O'Brien and Tim O'Keefe, both of the O'Keefe Law Firm. And Tim, specifically, you are, I want to say, the secretary of the North Dakota Association for Justice. Maybe I'm getting that wrong. Are you on the board? I'm forgetting what your association is.
Yeah, no, that's correct. I'm on the board, as is Tatum, and I'm currently on the executive committee. I'm the secretary.
Okay, you're both on the board. So I messed that up. All right, so you're both on the board. The North Dakota Association for Justice put out a statement, and let me set this up a little bit. The Miller campaign, based on obviously some of their comments, I mean, even going back into March, you had Governor Burgum suddenly started referring to Kelly Armstrong as Lawyer Armstrong. Then I had some readers share with me some surveys that the Miller campaign was doing, and some of the things they're asking in there is really focusing on Armstrong's past work as an attorney and as a criminal defense attorney, pointing out that he had represented some people who ended up being convicted of some pretty heinous crimes. He was their defense attorney, and now, most recently we had a little bit of a dust up where Dawson Schefter, who is a spokesperson for the Miller campaign, made a comment that politicians and trial lawyers often struggle with the truth. Well, the North Dakota Association for Justice, an organization that, according to their website, promotes the cause of those damaged in person, property, or human rights and defend the right to trial by jury and other rights guaranteed by our laws and Constitution, they took exception to that. This is a statement that they put out. I quote, "Trial lawyers are in North Dakota courtrooms across the state every day on behalf of North Dakotans. They spend countless hours on complex issues, sacrificing time with their families and often their own resources in an effort to obtain justice for their clients." When I published that, I got a statement from the Miller campaign again, and they doubled down. Schefter said, I quote, "It's no surprise lawyers and politicians are sticking up for each other. While Kelly Armstrong was raking in cash defending drug dealers, a man who beat his wife unconscious, and a man who attempted to suffocate his daughter, Tammy Miller was growing a company and creating thousands of jobs. Job creator or trial lawyer is an easy choice." Tatum, you're obviously on the board for the North Dakota Association for Justice. Why did your organization put out that statement?
Well, we put out the statement because we were offended. Attacking lawyers for being liars it's untrue, number one, and it's unfair. We're governed by the rule of law and the rule of ethics, and we have a duty of candor to opposing counsel and the court, and for her to attack Kelly for defending the Constitution, defending clients who have a right to counsel is it's just wrong.
Tim Worksatum, you're with the Association of Justice. Can you actually describe to folks? They have even those who aren't involved in law know what attorneys are. They know the court system, but they might not know what's the Association of Justice. What is the kind of bread and butter of what you do in the state of North Dakota?
Yeah, I can answer that. The Association for Justice, formerly known as North Dakota Trial Lawyers, is a group of lawyers that come together to share ideas, to work on laws, and to uphold the Constitution, with the main goal being in the consumer realm to allow access to the courts. And the Seventh Amendment, I hear all this stuff in the campaigns across the state about how important the Second Amendment is. Let's talk about the Sixth and the Seventh Amendment, Ms. Miller. What our organization is there is to protect access to the court system. And that was an important enough thing to the founding fathers to put it in the Constitution. So that's what our organization does, is we represent consumers, North Dakotans, small business. We want people to have their day in court. And so we also have a lobbying arm where we help write laws.
I'm going to ask you kind of just real quick, Rob, almost a bad faith follow-up question to that, though. Has you as an association, or either of you as attorneys, had any kind of interaction with Lieutenant Governor Miller before, during either her time as a CEO of border states or right now as her capacity as a candidate running for the highest office in North Dakota, that might lead to, understanding where some of these comments would have coming from her?
No.
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 I've never met Ms. Miller. I've never met the candidate. I've never met Dawson Schefter. But, when you read that, it really offends, as Tatum said. It offends you. And, I first met Rob Port in Minot, North Dakota in about February 2002. He picked me up at the airport. We were working with Raleigh Port. There was a group of lawyers trying to protect the citizens of Minot against the CP rail. And, if lawyers hadn't stepped in, the CP rail would have run over the citizens of Minot, writing out $500 checks to get them to go away.
Yeah.
They would have fought for immunity in the Congress to prohibit the recovery of property damage and personal damage. In that, we're talking about thousands of citizens in Minot. Rob remembers that. I know he does, because he lived it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I lived. It was the infamous anhydrous ammonia spill, which was terrifying. I was actually out of town when that happened, but my wife and child were in town. It was very scary. I remember waking up in the morning and learning about what happened and calling anxiously to make sure everyone was okay. And yeah, my father's private investigation firm worked on that and assisted obviously in the litigation and did a lot of interviews. My job was mostly to pick people up at the airport and make copies and things at that time, because I was 22 years old and didn't know much of anything. But yeah, I mean, it is important. And Tim made a point about, the Sixth and the Seventh Amendment. And I would also, given some of the comments about, like criminal defense work, I would add in, what about the Fourth Amendment against, our right to be protected from unlawful search and seizure, or the Fifth Amendment, which guarantees us a right to due process before we're denied life, liberty, or justice. I don't know any place, any venue where the Fourth Amendment specifically, if we just want to talk about one of them, the Fourth Amendment is defended more vigorously than in court by criminal defense lawyers.
It's the only way that you can defend it and enforce it is through people that have had it happen to them, that they've been unlawfully seized or searched in some form or fashion. Because, unfortunately, if someone unlawfully searches your home and doesn't find anything, well, that never makes it to court. Obviously, the ones that make it to court are the ones where they found something illegal, and that's where we have to defend the Constitution. And, some people just have the wrong view of it, saying like you're defending someone when you, quote, know that they're guilty. Well, they have a constitutional right to a defense. And what about their rights to unlawful search and seizure? What if What if they were pulled over for an unlawful reason? Normal citizens, they don't want that happening to themselves. So they need lawyers to defend those, or otherwise it's just going to keep getting chipped away at.
Tim O'Keefe, Tatum O'Brien, our guests here today, both with Association for Justice. You are part of that membership with that here in the state of North Dakota. Plus, you're both attorneys, so you've gone to law conferences around the country, I assume, certainly around North Dakota. Getting into the politics of this, given that I don't see any organic connection between Tammy Miller having an animosity towards attorneys, given that she's a very well-educated person that has done a lot of business work around the state, around the country. I have interpreted this, as have many others, as a result of political consultant polling coming back and saying, here's where we think we have a weak point on someone like Kelly Armstrong, who used to be a criminal defense attorney. Do you have any access to, I understand you don't have polling for this race in North Dakota, but is there public opinion? Is there an impression of what people, the general public thinks of attorneys? Has there been a national education or maybe public relations campaign to try and change that around? Because clearly, while I think it is crass as a campaign tactic, I think it's very much a low on substance, high on, something that can get clicks, something that can drag his name down. I don't think there's a lot of substance there. She must be doing it for a reason. She must have some sort of piece of information. Can you speak to that? Can you speak to anything that fellow attorneys or yourselves are doing with the public's impression of that? It's a lot to ask.
I don't have any polling data. It's not a political venture for either Tatum or I, but it would strike me that she probably has a failing campaign and bad numbers. So she's attacking. And hey, who doesn't love to attack a lawyer? Or as Rob said, think your favorite lawyer joke. But the reality is that often individuals and small businesses don't know lawyers until they need one. And you can't tell me that Tammy Miller, as CEO of a big corporation, wasn't using lawyers to help protect that company and keep the profits high. And that's just the follow the money thing again. But I don't have any inside info as to why she's doing it. All I know is that politicians don't live under the same ethical standards as lawyers do. We go through character and fitness exams to get our license. We are checked regularly by the Bar Association. We have inquiry committees that take on complaints. And, like it or not, lawyers are there to protect the Constitution and protect the citizens of North Dakota.
Well, I would add to that lawyers also are in charge of policing lawyers. I'm on the inquiry committee now. Tim was formerly on it, and literally it's a panel of lawyers and lay people that are in charge of if someone makes a complaint against a lawyer for doing something that's unethical or violates the rule, then the board or the panel looks at the allegations, and we make a recommendation on whether or not the lawyer should be disciplined for not following the rules of ethics. So we are very ethical and policed by each other.
And I would add that, back in the George Bush administration, Karl Rove was a big proponent of tort reform. And the word trial lawyer was at that time, they tried to make it a dirty word. But I think that trial lawyers have persevered and shown that, they're not bad people. We're not bringing frivolous lawsuits. Trial lawyers take the risk, whether they're public defenders in the criminal system, not getting paid all that well, or whether they're lawyers taking on injury claims on a contingency or property damage claims on a contingency. The lawyers are taking all the risk. And what lawyer is going to want to throw thousands of dollars and hours at a case if it doesn't have merit?
You made a really good point there. It's funny. Border States Electric, which is a fine company as far as I know, I'm certain that they've probably been party to. I haven't checked. I'm pretty certain no company gets that large without at some point being a party to litigation in some way. They undoubtedly employ lawyers, both in-house counsel to negotiate contracts and things like that, I'm sure, and also maybe outside counsel if they do end up in some sort of a legal dispute with somebody. I don't understand, and that is kind of the funny thing. I think both politicians are in this category and lawyers are in this category, where we like it's fashionable to have a negative point of view about the profession, but yet at the end of the day, it's the politicians who make the laws. I mean, there's politicians who really do help a lot of people. You call constituent center services at your senator's office, and they help you navigate the Department of Veterans Affairs or something. Or a lawyer, if grandma's got a really complicated estate, a lawyer sits down and helps her lay it all out so that she can, be assured that her property and her estate is going to be left behind in the way she wants. Or if you get hurt because somebody's acting recklessly and they run into you with their car, or a business was acting negligently and you get hurt in some way, who's going to help you get satisfaction? This is the way the process works. And so it's a weird sort of double standard where, on one hand, it's like we don't like them. The thing I always like to point out with politicians is you look at Congress's approval rating, right? Like typically like 10, 11, 12, 13%. But yet most members of Congress get reelected over and over again. How does that happen? I feel like there's a disconnect between public perception, and I think if we're all trying to figure out why Tammy Miller's doing this, I think she's trying to exploit that disconnect. It's just kind of a throwaway line. I'm wondering if they expected you attorneys to fire back like this. I think usually, you guys laugh at the lawyer jokes too, right?
Sure.
I'm not sure she was expecting this, maybe. But it is interesting, and I guess I'm glad it's happening because, again, a lot of our rights, they don't exist if we don't have lawyers to defend them for us.
Right. And there aren't Republican and Democrat lawyers in the courtrooms. That may be their political belief outside. But once you get into that courtroom, it changes. And what I noticed on the Twitter machine and social media and emails amongst colleagues, people that I know are strong Republicans, people that I know that are strong Democrats, all lawyers have come together on this issue. If that was her intent, to bring lawyers together and get their voice heard, she succeeded. I don't think that's what she wanted.
There's precedent for this. Back, Attorney General Wayne Stenehjem was facing, former Attorney General Wayne Stenehjem, Republican obviously, was facing a challenge from Glenn Pomeroy, a Democrat. And at the time, Glenn Pomeroy made some comments. I think it was something along the lines that Stenehjem was an ambulance chaser and a divorce attorney or something like that. And at the time, there was the same sort of backlash. I think if I'm remembering right, I think the State Bar Association even put out a press release kind of taking him to task for this. So and I think Ben kind of touched on this before, but is there, in these industry groups or whatnot, Tatum, is there an effort to rehabilitate or defend the image of attorneys and say, listen, we're not hucksters, we're not ambulance chasers, we're just people trying to help other people?
Well, I think, like Tim said, when back in the day when trial lawyers, became a dirty word, I think our association, as well as the national organization, the American Association for Justice, that we're members of, we all changed their names to Association for Justice. It used to be the North Dakota Association of Trial Lawyers. And so just to let the public know, trial lawyers is not a dirty word, that we're out here fighting for your rights and for the Constitution and for justice and for, consumer safety and all of those things. Like Tim touched on the Minot derailment. Those are all of the things that we're trying to do and trying to let people know that we're doing, as well as the association lobbying for against tort reform and different safety things for consumers. I know that there was a bill at the legislature last session where they were trying to get immunity for gun manufacturers, which, that doesn't sound dangerous at all, right? So we went and lobbied against that because clearly we want our, people of North Dakota to be safe. And if they have defective ammunition, they should be able to sue the manufacturer if they get injured.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Well, I think on that one too, but there is a debate sometimes to have about this stuff, because on one hand, I want gun manufacturers or ammunition manufacturers to be liable if they are negligent and put people in danger. On the other hand, there's a debate to be had about whether or not they should be legally liable for what somebody does with the legal product that they sell. that's a hard debate to have sometimes. And I guess maybe that gets to another point is, like any group of people, there's bad actors among attorneys. So there's people who are frustrating or who don't operate in good faith. Obviously there's ethic. Can you walk through, some of the like how people are held accountable sometimes who maybe aren't engaging in the profession in an ethical way?
Yeah. Inquiry committee, if people have an issue with their lawyers, they can make a complaint to the inquiry committee, will investigate it, and disciplinary counsel for the state of North Dakota, for the bar, they police all the lawyers and they investigate the claims. And if there is an issue to be had, they can be disciplined, they can be disbarred, they can have all kinds of consequences if they are not behaving appropriately and not following our rules of ethics.
The State Bar Association, right on their website, has a link where any citizen in the state can file a complaint against their lawyer. As Tatum said, it's investigated by the disciplinary council and an inquiry committee made up of lawyers and lay people. Mm-hmm. And then it can go on to, it can be litigated up to the Supreme Court if necessary. But the Supreme Court ultimately will hand down, as the overseer of the license, the discipline or the disbarment of a lawyer, and you'll hear about it once in a while. And the dishonest lawyer is typically one that steals from their client.
Mm-hmm. Or doesn't respond to their client, Yeah.
So there's a good policing system amongst the state bar.
Unfortunately, a lot of criminal defense lawyers end up being complained about frequently because a lot of them do public defense work, and a lot of the frequent flyers, instead of saying, well, maybe I should stop breaking the law, they make complaints that their public defender didn't do a good job. So as being on the inquiry committee, that is most of what you see is complaints against public defenders who are, defending their right to counsel. And most of them are frivolous in that regard.
Public defenders who tend to be on the lower end of the pay scale when it comes to being an attorney. I was going to say, Tim and Tatum, that the labels issue seems to me to be a race to the bottom. And I'm not blaming the attorneys associations for doing what they did after, a widespread PR campaign to kind of trash trial lawyers as, ambulance chasers. But I see the same thing in elections. We have candidates who are running for political office going out of the way to say, I am not a politician. And if the logic is applied to other professions, it becomes absurd. I'm not a professional. I'm not an NFL, member or whatever. I'm an athlete. I'm not someone who, fixes, I'm not a grease monkey. I'm a car mechanic. Well, okay, these are interchangeable. These are synonyms for each other. And it becomes something that because candidates do not have to build campaigns in a way that is sustainable. They have to build up campaigns in a way that can spend all the money and get the result they want on election day. And after that, it doesn't matter, especially for U.S. Senate because it's a 6-year term. But this one is on the gubernatorial side. One of the things they use to trash, there's a lot of things they use to trash politicians. One of the things that, to Tatum's point, they use to trash, especially defense attorneys, is the crimes of the clients that you are defending. Specifically, Tammy Miller goes out and calls out in detail various things of clients, supposedly, I haven't looked it up, assuming it's true, that Kelly Armstrong has defended in court. To me, the implication seems to be trying to shade him or do a guilt by association somehow. Obviously you are both people who have had experience with this and have encountered lay people or non-legal people who have said, like, how could you defend a rapist for doing blank, or for, a drug dealer for getting someone hooked on, fill in the blank of every horrible thing under the sun. What is your response to that, to the general, to the public that's outside of the court system, outside of the legal world, that doesn't have exposure to that hears someone like Tammy Miller saying that in a campaign, saying, how could Kelly Armstrong defend someone like that? And do you have a response to that?
Yes. I mean, everybody has the right to an attorney when they're accused of a crime, and it's part of the Constitution, and they have a right to a reasonable delays to make their defense, and they have a right to cross-examine witnesses against them. And they have all of those rights, and it's the state's burden of proof to prove that they're guilty. And so when you defend someone that, quote, is guilty, I mean, that's what you're doing, is you're defending their right to the Constitution, which is their right to counsel. And I mean, Kelly was a criminal defense attorney out in Dickinson during the oil boom. I would venture to guess that upwards of 90% of his cases were DUIs, but also, again, he's just defending people's right to have a criminal defense attorney, and that's in the Constitution, and everybody has that right, and everybody should exercise that right, because Google doesn't teach you what your lawyer will.
And I would also add to that just because someone's guilty doesn't mean they shouldn't have counsel to make sure the process is fair. The Sixth Amendment will give them that right to the jury, but also many defense lawyers help their clients understand that you are guilty, or if you plead guilty, this is what can happen to you. There's
collateral consequences, part of the plea. Also, this might shock you, but sometimes prosecutors overcharge things. Sometimes they charge you with something that isn't the right crime, and they charge you with a felony when it really should be a misdemeanor or even an infraction, or they charge you with the crime when they really don't have the evidence to prove that it was you. And so just because you're charged with a crime doesn't mean that you're actually guilty of the crime, and you are entitled to a defense.
Well, former President Donald Trump is entitled to a defense right now. He's got teams of lawyers representing him in courtrooms across the country. And however you feel about Donald Trump, certainly my views are clear. He has the absolute right to all of the legal counsel that he wants to have. That's his right under the law. And I do think, because I think sometimes in politics we get so glib about things, and we make fun of things, or we I think we forget what we're doing to the process. I mean, this is a time where so many of our institutions have been undermined, whether it's our electoral systems or faith in the criminal justice system, faith in the courts. A lot of Americans are not feeling trust, which that's kind of part of the reason why I wanted to have you two on, and I'm glad you came on, is I do think it's important to defend some of this stuff, even though maybe it seems really obvious. We're in a place right now where a lot of the things we didn't think we'd have to defend, we're having to defend again. And I personally want attorneys defending my 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th Amendment rights, my 8th Amendment right, all of them. Maybe 3rd Amendment quartering troops, I don't know how relevant that one is anymore.
Yeah, we don't spend a lot of time on that one.
Yeah, it doesn't get invoked very often anymore.
And I'm proud, and it's on my business card, it's on my website, that I'm a trial lawyer. If people ask me, well, what do you do? I tell them I'm a trial lawyer. I'm sure that Kelly Armstrong says, well, I'm a member of the House of Representatives from North Dakota, and he's proud of probably all those things. I'm just guessing, but I'm proud to be from North Dakota. I bet he is too. Okay. And I just wonder, from what I was reading when all this came up, if Tammy Miller will still be proud to be a North Dakotan if she loses, or if she'll be on the golf course in Arizona. So not to get overly political, I just fire back at her and say, I'm damn proud to be a trial lawyer, and I'm damn proud to represent people that need it in the criminal or civil justice system. And however you feel about Donald Trump, he deserves lawyers to defend him.
And just one last point before we wrap up. Every criminal defendant, when they're hire a defense attorney, when they've first been charged and everything, that person is by definition innocent. They haven't been found guilty yet. Which is part of the reason why they're entitled. They have a right to an attorney, because they are innocent. And obviously you have a right even after you're convicted to legal representation. We're gonna stop it there. Thank you both for coming on so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
The cold cases you see at The Vault have captivated readers across our region for years. At The Vault Podcast, our team of professional reporters takes you further into those stories with new interviews from family members, investigators, and experts. Check out The Vault at inforum.com/The Vault and subscribe to The Vault wherever you find your podcasts.
Well, after spending about 30 minutes defending the honor of lawyers, we're now going to move over and talk a little bit about energy. Although that was an interesting interview, Ben, I will tell you there's nothing that drives me nuts more than people who just won't be, I think when they're disingenuous about what they are. I was really happy to hear there's nothing wrong with being an attorney. I mean, look at how many moms and dads want their kids to grow up to be attorneys. A lot of the work they do is important. And yeah, there's scummy attorneys out there. Of course there are. And there's scummy politicians out there. But just, I don't like it when politicians tell us they're not politicians. If you're running for elected office, if you're raising money from people and you want to hold that power, you're a politician. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with it.
I was able to do a basic Google search and found 3 pretty major pieces of litigation involving Bohrer States Electric within the last 2 decades, 2 of which were while Tammy Miller was CEO. So that was kind of interesting too. But I'm guessing our guest, Jason Bohrer, doesn't really care too much about.
No, we're gonna shift gears, and we're not gonna make Jason.
I am an attorney.
Oh, Jason is an attorney.
I am interested, and it's not a big deal, but just my observation when I was working on Capitol Hill, when I was chief of staff, I was working for Raul Labrador, who was an attorney from Idaho. He had a different profile from Kelly, but he was a defense attorney and he worked with immigration cases. He defended some women who had been battered who were in the country illegally. Like, that is a hard charge to defend when in a conservative primary. But it's also unfair to make these sweeping generalizations that all of these people, what's the alternative, especially from a position of limited government? Are we just, that gets to our point here on the energy stuff, that the government has unlimited resources to crush voices that they disagree with.
Yeah,
and
a lot of times we think
are working with attorneys on the energy stuff, and some of these guys need attorneys on the personal stuff.
So, yeah. When
segues nicely into
it does actually. When we have the federal government coming in with, say, new EPA regulations that just came out, and the state of North Dakota or some of the industries that work in the state of North Dakota want to defend their rights or feel like the federal government is maybe exceeding the bounds of the Constitution or exceeding the bounds of their authority under the law. Who do you think litigates that in court? Lawyers do.
Right.
So it's hugely important. Anyway, Jason, we wanted to have you on specifically to talk about carbon capture. And we saw some drama with the North Dakota Republican Party at the convention. It appeared as though they had passed a resolution basically calling carbon capture fascism and everything else. Then after a recount, it turns out that resolution fell 2 votes short of the supermajority it needed to be part of the Republican Party platform. So the party now doesn't have a resolution concerning carbon capture. And I want to talk about all that, but there's one thing I wanted to ask you, because I think I know the answer, but obviously I think in North Dakotans right now in this moment, we're having a very contentious debate about a specific project within the carbon capture. And I realize carbon capture isn't like the scientifically, specifically accurate term for this, right, but this is how people know it. Carbon capture and transport. It's the pipelines. It's capturing the carbon, transporting it by pipeline, putting it down underground. That's what we're talking about. Summit Carbon Solutions, the Midwest Carbon Express. A lot of people have very strong feelings about that. Do you think it's important, though, that North Dakotans distinguish between the concept of carbon capture and storage, or the larger industry of carbon capture and storage, and that specific project?
Yeah, I think that's the key to getting a great outcome, is understanding how an individual project differs from a technological opportunity or a regulatory solution or a power plant's view to the future. It really is the critical question. And how we approach that is why we were where we were on some of the bills in the last legislative session, because we're trying to take a long-term view, holistic approach as to the question of, is this good policy or not from a long-term perspective? We are the largest producers of CO2 in North Dakota, which means we have the most at stake. and the greatest opportunity. So we've been dealing with this and looking down at this future for 30 years because we see it is so important to the future of our industry, either from a regulatory challenge or an economic perspective.
Jason, let me take you back to that Republican convention. I cannot remember. Were you a delegate or were you present either as a person?
I was not present. No,
you were not present.
Not present, not a delegate.
Have you had discussions with other Lignite members, with other energy members about what a resolution like that might mean for your industry, or has that not come up within internal discussion?
Absolutely. When we first got wind of that resolution, we started talking to the folks within the party that we did know. There's plenty of delegates from within our office even, and trying to say, what does this mean? Number one, how did it happen? And number two, what does it mean? And there is a political calculation there that, how party, this is kind of the give and take, is how individual parties govern themselves and, how they implement their platforms really is outside the scope of what the Lignite Energy Council is about. But we still have an interest in those policy resolutions that affect our industry. So we tried to find the balance of how do we educate people about what this resolution might mean if it's implemented, if our policymakers take it seriously, and what those negative consequences might be, and also go and take an information the other way to the party, saying, by the way, legislators have been very supportive of these things. And again, what the parties do in their governance is outside my scope, but it was almost an action that the Republican Party was taking that could have minimized its influence among the legislators. If you're way out of step from where the legislators are, you're not going to bring them with you. You're going to further marginalize yourself. And I thought that was an important message too.
Do you feel like there's I feel like part of the risk too, when you see a resolution like that, is they're gonna, they're worried that they're gonna throw the baby out with the bathwater. Where again, I think a lot of the feelings about carbon capture and storage, a lot of the strong, and by the way, I think there's polling out there that shows that most North Dakotans are supportive of carbon capture. It's a concept. Now, and by the way, I support the Summit carbon pipeline, but that's, I think it's fair to say the company there has made some mistakes. They took an aggressive approach at times with landowners, and now they're reaping the whirlwind in some ways. But I think it's very dangerous that we tie the industry or the concept or the technology is the term that you use, that we tie that to that one project. Like this shouldn't live or die. And I feel like that's what that resolution at the NDGOP did, is it took the anger that some people feel over the Summit project and extrapolated it to carbon capture in general. And I think that's really, because I'm seeing people now, it's like, oh, they're going to suck all the oxygen. And that's plant food. They're going to suck all the plant food out of the air and things like that. And it's like, no, we're taking all this carbon out from under the ground and we're putting it up in the atmosphere. We want to grab some of it and put it back down underground. Like this is a very good thing for not just energy. I mean, obviously you're the coal industry, but the oil and gas industry, and then frankly, agriculture too. Agriculture, believe it or not, is a carbon heavy industry. There's things we need to do across the board to do this. So I mean, is that your report? I mean, obviously you're doing it for your industry. That's your job. That's your scope. But this is important for North Dakota. And I feel like there was a possibility here that we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I think it is good for North Dakota. It has the potential, just in our industry, to double the size of the coal industry. There could be an entirely new industry in North Dakota created with this that is another, 13,000 jobs, $6 billion. That's like the next big thing in North Dakota is this industry. And we're getting off the rails because of a project. Now, if, you remember back to when the Pinto came out and you could, figure out how do we make sure that this bad car doesn't get on the road again. When you talk about the car itself, you don't say we're not going to allow any more small cars to be built. You go back and fix the one issue. And again, the Summit project had some issues getting up, but my issue is I know so many of those people over there. I know what they're trying to do, and I'm sympathetic with what they're trying to do while recognizing that there was a better way to do it. But that doesn't really impact the coal industry because they're not our members. That project is not going to have coal carbon in it. It really is outside the scope of the Lignite Energy Council. So I look at it from afar, but it is not our project. And go ahead.
Hold on, just to be specific then. So Summit Carbon Capture would not be capturing any carbon produced by the coal industry in North Dakota. Am I understanding that correctly?
As currently planned, no, it wouldn't. It is an ethanol-only facility, and it is outside, like I said, we just don't have anything to do with that project.
I don't even know that they're collecting. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, at least at one point, every ethanol plant they were collecting from was in another state. North Dakota's involvement was they're going to bring it to North Dakota, I think for a couple reasons. We have the right geology for it that's very conducive to being able to bury it here. And North Dakota is one of just, I think, 3 states that have primacy on permitting carbon wells, where we're putting the carbon back down underground. So North Dakota has the regulatory authority to do it. We have a political leadership that's willing to do it. We have the right geology for it, which is why it's conducive to bring that carbon from ethanol plants in Iowa and Minnesota and South Dakota and bring it here. I don't think there's any. Maybe there's 1 or 2, but I don't think.
I believe they were going to link into that soybean crushing plant.
Were they?
Plan
Okay.
for capture. I believe. Okay. Jason, I wanted to take it back to you with two-point question, which is you said this carbon capture technology and ability to do so could double the size of the coal industry. One quick question was: is that specific to North Dakota? And 2, when you are a person that you live in the energy world, and you also know that there are a lot of folks, even in North Dakota, that simply don't. Do you have any research or knowledge of how much, like, say, the average North Dakota voter, for instance, because you do a lot of voter education, knows about carbon capture? Was that, something like, Lignite Energy is separated from Summit Energy. When someone's not in the energy industry, they're just hearing this general energy thing is happening. Do you know how much the public knows about this, what their favorability is towards carbon capture in North Dakota?
Yeah, the general favorability is above 50% for the average North Dakota voter. It's not like super strong, intense favorability, but the average North Dakota understands that this is a valid technology with a potential future. And so where the numbers break down a little bit is there's actually not real widespread knowledge in North Dakota about the individual projects, whether that's the Summit project or others. And so sometimes what we see is when there is a lot of negativity in the news that solidifies the opposition, and those people who are independent or, outside of that coverage, they're not really getting any information at all about that project or about carbon capture in general. So we try and take advantage of that opportunity, just talk about what the technology is, what the pore space opportunity is, how everyone and every industry in North Dakota can be a winner from this technology as it develops.
And that potential expansion on the industry you're talking about, is that North Dakota specific or nationwide?
Oh, yes, it is. So what that study does, it calculates the economic impact if all of North Dakota's coal-powered plants implemented carbon capture technology and sent that CO2 into the oil field for enhanced oil recovery. So that's where you get the leveraging of the oil and gas industry, because then you get an extra X billion barrels of oil out of that while prolonging the life of the coal industry. And this is one of the synergies that we probably don't talk about enough, providing the electricity that allows the oil industry to thrive and every other industry in North Dakota. We have the lowest electricity rates in the country in North Dakota. And that is an economic driver in and of itself.
And you'd be specifically selling that captured carbon to oil fields in North Dakota and the surrounding areas in Montana and Canada. It's not, you wouldn't have it. Yeah. Okay.
The interesting thing about this debate sometimes is I think sometimes we have these debates and a variable that we're leaving out is human ingenuity. Thomas Malthus famously, he was an economist, 19th century, I think, economist who predicted it that our population and the demands of meeting our population, of feeding our population, was going to outstrip our ability to produce food. And he actually did calculations like yield rates and how much, acreage it takes to grow the crops that are going to sustain, population. And he predicted widespread starvation and everything else. What he didn't account for, though, was human ingenuity. What he didn't account for was our ability to make, develop crops that were more resilient to weather, that were more resilient to disease, or development of technology that allowed fewer people to farm more land. We got better at it. We got efficient at it. And I think the same applies here, where we think, okay, we're emitting all this stuff and there's nothing we can do about it. We're going to be acted upon by our environment. Therefore, we have to make these radical changes. And what if the answer is that we don't? What if we can use human ingenuity to put a thermostat on the climate and basically control our outputs? We can do this. This is something that we can do. Why would we not want to pursue it? And whether because it's kind of weird, the opposition to carbon capture. It's coming from like kind of the right and the left in some ways for different reasons.
It is.
I look at them and I just want to say to them, like why wouldn't, whatever you don't have to believe what Greta Thunberg believes about climate change, right? You don't have to believe what Al Gore believes about it to believe that it's a good thing to be able to control how our industry impacts the environment. I don't know that we need a better reason for it than that.
No, and you're absolutely right. And slight diversion, there's an argument to be made based on your ingenuity recollection that the most important person in the history of mankind is Norman Borlaug, who came up with the innovations in ag that have allowed us to feed the world, contradicting some of those Malthusian predictions. But so on the energy technology side, the interesting thing is that every projection made by Republicans or Democrats about the future of energy relies upon continuing energy innovation. On the left, the Green New Deal relied upon increasing battery technology development beyond the scope of what we've already seen. And on the right, it relies upon increasing innovation in small modular reactors on the nuclear industry. Both the left and the right agree that we will have to innovate in the energy space. But why do they not think that carbon capture follows the same rules as every other energy innovation? If you have the confidence to believe that we can solve battery chemistry problems on electric vehicles, on battery storage, it's the same group of brilliant minds that can solve whatever problem remains on carbon capture, which, by the way, are primarily commercial at this point. There's very few technological challenges that stand in between a lignite power plant and a successful carbon capture operation. We've done the work in North Dakota solving those technology problems. But your point is astute, that the technology should find the way. And we generally recognize that in a lot of other topics except carbon capture.
Jason, you do not like the new EPA. So I shouldn't just personify it as you. Lignite Energy Council and other energy producers have been critical of the new EPA ruling. Can you get into the nitty gritty with us why you are opposed to it? And then can you also tell me, how would you go about accomplishing what the goals are in a different way? Do you have an alternative route for the federal government to look at?
Really, I can start with the carbon capture piece. One of the objections to the regulation on the carbon dioxide that the EPA just issued is it literally ignores the state of technology development. The EPA is supposed to propose commercial technological solutions to today's emissions challenges. In other words, they're not supposed to force you to install a science project onto your power plant and hope for the best. DOE is still fine-tuning carbon capture technology. So even the Department of Energy does not share the same viewpoint as the EPA that carbon capture is off-the-shelf, technologically ready commercial technology. So that's one of the challenges. The other challenge is the time frame involved in this carbon dioxide rule ignores basic history and other logistical challenges. Like Rob said earlier, there's only 3 states that have primacy to store CO2. What if you're operating a power plant in a state that doesn't have primacy? It took North Dakota 10 years to get primacy. And these power plants are supposed to be operating with carbon capture sooner than that. So there's these just really common sense, logistical, self-evident challenges with this EPA regulation that would prevent a utility from even understanding if the technology was feasible on a particular power plant in the time frame that EPA contemplates here. So on that one, it's kind of like, look at what we've done. Come talk to us, and we can walk through how these projects come together, and then do something realistic with the CO2 regulation.
You know, a little bit ago, we asked the question, why is there like this hostility where we're constant? It seems like some, you know, for instance, I think the politics behind what the EPA is trying to do, I think it's born of a desire to just see coal die. And I think there's a lot of people who are invested in that politically. Like, I mean, all the years of what, you know, the Captain Planet cartoons that I grew up with as a kid and everything, like, you know, they're always the bad guys, right? They're always like the evil people who are out to poison everybody or something. I think we're so invested in that idea that, or the idea that coal is old, it's busted, maybe it's even villainous. Therefore, we just have to move on to something. And it doesn't leave any room for what if we can do coal better. And by the way, ignoring the history in which we have continuously made coal better, addressing all sorts of concerns about emissions that we've solved in the past. Carbon is another emission that we can solve. We just have to do it on the right timeline, but we're getting there. Yeah. I mean, I think it's really hard to sort of stop that political inertia. And I think sometimes what I want to tell my Democratic friends, and Chad and I talk about this all the time, is I wish sometimes if you would recognize, like, you wonder why you can't win elections in North Dakota. It's because you're constantly trying to kill all our jobs here. You know, if you would stop and listen to us and work with us a little bit, we'll work with you, you work with us, and, you know, maybe we can get there. But I just think we get really myopic about this stuff sometimes. And I think that impedes our ability to get better and achieve the goals that we all want.
Yeah, it's a problem with the way energy policy is made in Washington, D.C. It has created a zero-sum game where you can't win unless somebody else loses. And that has contributed to the problem that we have right now, where there are folks who feel that renewables can't win unless coal loses, and coal can't win unless renewables lose, or coal can't win unless nuclear loses. And you know, that's not the right way to do it, because there are definitely people on both sides who would be happy with a lower standard of living if it meant that the energy sources they don't like went away. And that's counterintuitive. That's not the policies that we should be making.
Well, those people willing to take that hit are usually pretty high on the standard of living list, right? In the first place. Like,
You're absolutely right.
They're not school teachers, you know, barely scraping by, who are thinking, oh, sure, it's fine if my electric bill is 45% higher every month.
And some of those things they are not just superficial ignorance. It's the way our lives are built. And it's this whole, like, hardening of borders in the United States, where these policymakers from California or New York, they grow up in cities that they never leave. They never come to North Dakota. One of the things they don't see is they don't understand what a standalone 2,000 square foot house is with 500 acres and all these things that require energy. So when they look at statistics and they say, North Dakota's per capita energy use is way higher than California's. Therefore, they're doing something wrong. They don't care or have the time, if they do care, to understand why that difference exists. They just want to smooth that difference out through aggressive policies. That's not the right way to do it. You have to learn about what those other people are doing.
It makes me think why they're curious why like electric cars haven't taken off in North Dakota. Don't get me wrong, I like electric cars. I think they're super cool, but they haven't taken off in North Dakota because I can't drive from Minot to Fargo without having to stop for like an hour to charge. That's under optimal conditions. Like my car can't operate that way. Like that's not efficient for me as a North Dakotan. I'd love to own an electric car one day when it works for me. It's not that, so I think sometimes we interpret it like, oh, they're just conservatives. They're not enlightened enough to like electric cars. No, they're just not practical for us. Sorry, Ben, you had a question.
Yeah,
I did. Well, Jason, I wanted to, it's funny how your points about the nuance with the context behind energy stats between states kind of ties into kind of a theme on today's show about the kind of race to the bottom of name calling without studying issues here in our elections. And I had a politics question for you. Rick Becker has called out your name specifically while also criticizing Julie Fedorchak on he was criticizing her for having a personal vested interest in the Summit carbon capture, which we've established the separation between that and Lignite Energy Council here. But he's also called your name out and Lignite out in meetings with the PSC as having favoritism displayed towards it. Did you happen to have, I'm sure you've heard them, do you happen to have any response to that? And more importantly, as a follow-up, we have a contentious Republican primary, both for governor and for U.S. Congress right now. Lignite Energy does donate to candidates in addition to educating them. Will Lignite be endorsing a candidate or donating to candidates in the Republican primaries for the House or for governor?
We have donated in the past. We have not made a significant amount of contributions right now. We've donated. We have sent some money to Kelly. We have contributed to Julie in the past. Those represent really well-reasoned viewpoints of where our industry is and the voice of the industry. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Being able to interface with elected officials is a First Amendment right. That's our right to be able to petition these officials and talk to them. And they want to hear from people in the industry. And, over the years, we've developed relationships with these folks and they've developed records. And I think that's where these people who criticize sometimes trip over themselves is we're evaluating these people based on their record, and the records attract the support. And that is meaningful when you see someone who supports your industry, who knows about the industry, and who is endorsing policies that are good for the whole state and good for the energy industry. So that's kind of the way politics work, is those folks who understand the policies and make good policy, they tend to be supported by the industry.
It's always a funny thing. I hear people, and not necessarily Rick Becker per se, but I mean, if you believe that the people who want to shut down coal plants have every right to support the candidates that they prefer, then the people who want to build coal plants and mine coal also have every right to support the candidates that they think is best for their interests. That's how democracy works. We're going to stop it there, though. Jason, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This has been great. Really appreciate it.
The cold cases you see at the Vault have captivated readers across our region for years. At the Vault podcast, our team of professional reporters takes you further into those stories with new interviews from family members, investigators, and experts. Check out The Vault at inforum.com/The Vault and subscribe to The Vault wherever you find your podcasts.
Welcome back. Just finished up with Jason Bohrer. We chatted with Jason a little bit after we stopped the recording, and he was making the point that it really frustrates him in this political environment where like just sort of partisanship and tribalism are central to the political debate, and issues get pushed to the edges. And also made the point, they're put in a position sometimes of it's so partisan, and unfortunately, there's just not a lot of Democrats left in elected office who are running for office who are supporting, are supportive of their industry. And that's really hard for them. And I mean, I empathize with that. I think sometimes people look at the coal industry and say, oh, it's a Republican industry, or the oil and gas industry. Oh, it's a Republican. It doesn't have to be. All they want to do is they want to pump oil. They want to produce gas. They want to mine coal. That's it.
You can make a funny argument. Well, not funny. You can make a very realistic argument that Lyndon Johnson would not have been able to win his primary and become a U.S. senator, nor become U.S. president, if he did not have the backing of Brown and Root, a oil company in Texas that got a lot of favorable permissions and regulatory rulings off of him. Now, that's maybe a little different than the story they'd want to tell. The point being, it's not a history that's been.
Yeah, we are not saying that the Lignite Energy Council really wants special favors. But they have a right to promote the policies that they think is best for them. Just the same as the Sierra Club's got the right to, support candidates who want to shut coal down. I mean, it's all democracy, but I think it's another example of how these sharp partisan divides are hurting all of us.
I appreciate his point about it becoming a Republican versus Democrat issue, where he would like to keep it on the industry and consumer side. I will say, specific to carbon capture, right now in the Dakotas, there is, you could call it a maybe a noisy wing that's the minority, but I don't know. Today's fringe is tomorrow's mainstream. Clearly, folks like Senator Jeff Magrum want Summit Carbon Capture not to be able to put in their carbon capture technology into the state of North Dakota. There is a wide-ranging contingent in South Dakota that comes to the Capitol and is very loud about the lobbying they're doing about also Summit. So Summit's not done well here, but I've heard pushback saying, well, Summit isn't the only player in the carbon capture industry. Well, unfortunately, it's kind of like big telecom companies or like the railroad industry. In order to play, you got to be such a moneyed player. There's no such thing as a mom and pop startup carbon capture company. So when they see Summit and they see it as being the industry, that's not unrealistic. They're the only players right now. There's no competition in North Dakota right now besides Summit.
It's a nascent industry. It's a new thing. And Summit, in a lot of ways, we say that the first one through the gate. We've had a carbon pipeline operating in North Dakota for more than 2 decades in Western North Dakota.
That's permitted and pumping right now.
Permitted and pumping and operating safely. We've done this before. But you're right. In the imaginations of the public right now, Summit is the face of carbon capture. And I think that's what Lignite, while not trying to throw Summit under the bus, I don't think, certainly they're sympathetic to what they're trying to do. Their argument is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, and I have to point out, I understand right now they're not big players on the legislative or statewide scene, but if the Democratic Party in North Dakota, if the DemNPL had a resolution saying they wanted to kick out, what was the language? Carbon capture is fascism. I mean, there wasn't like basically they used the word fascism.
They did, yeah.
It was explicit. It's not it came close. It almost passed. You want to get into some of that fun recount shenanigans?
Our Democratic friends, I get it. But why not? This is an effort by the fossil fuel industries to try to limit their impact on climate. Why would you not support this? Especially because oil and gas is not going anywhere. Coal is still going to be a huge part of our energy grid for a long time into the future. If we can do some of this stuff, if we can preserve North Dakota jobs, by the way, a lot of them union jobs, why would you not want to do that, Democrats?
Is there still a big union presence at Lignite, though? Because I know one of the only other union places shut down in North Dakota.
It's more around. I think some of the people at the power plants are. But it's more the industry. I think some of the truckers or Teamsters and stuff like that. But some of them, I'm not saying all of them, but some of them are definitely union jobs.
Yeah, well, the Teamsters would be very against carbon capture because that's going to put on a pipeline that doesn't allow them to drive it on a truck. If you really want to get into it.
Okay, fair enough.
You wrote a little bit about the voting. I don't know if shenanigans is the right word, but it wasn't accurate. It wasn't on. We didn't have immediate results on these resolutions. And admittedly, resolutions. I had a friend at a Democrat convention years back who said, couldn't we just get everybody in a room and play Wouldn't It Be Nice by the Beach Boys for an hour instead of doing the resolutions committee, because it would be as effective. And it's kind of how I feel about party platform resolutions. But for a party, this is the Republican Party, that has a wing that is very fixated on hand counts, on election accuracy, on suspecting elections being rigged. We had a lot of ambiguity as to how votes went down at the Republican convention.
So there was a proposal for the North Dakota Republican Party to use electronic voting. And I looked up the vendor, and the vendor they were going to use, I mean, they do this sort of stuff all the time. I think they're used, some of their clients are like corporations when they hold shareholder meetings, right? You have a bunch of shareholders in the room. They have to vote on corporate governance, so they have it there. I mean, they have these strong systems, and they didn't use them. But imagine at that North Dakota Republican Party, at that convention that I was in the room for, you were in the room there for,
also
happened to be there. You weren't there as a delegate or anything, but if they'd been using that electronic voting, how much faster the proceedings would have went. You wouldn't have had the spoiled ballots thing, because how do you spoil a ballot when you're voting electronically? You wouldn't have had any of that nonsense going on. You would have had the results immediately and quickly, and they would have been tabulated electronically, and we wouldn't have had these errors that now throw. I mean, if you think about it, the carbon capture resolution, it passed at first, and then when they recounted, it turns out it failed by 2 votes. The second vote of the U.S. House race, the separation, and by the way, neither candidate ever got a majority. Julie Fedorchak ended up conceding because it was getting ridiculous and everybody was tired. And I think she just said, listen, we'll go to June. Congratulations to Alex Balaz, who did, ultimately win because Julie pulled out. But that last vote, they were separated by 6 votes. How do we know
6 votes? What was the switch on the resolution, the carbon capture resolution? It won by how many at first?
I forget how many it won by. It was pretty narrow. I don't know the exact number, but when it finally passed, when it finally failed, it failed by 2 votes.
So if it was a more than 6 vote switch, to me, I can't imagine being Julie Fedorchak, being a multiple times endorsed candidate who brandishes her longstanding family and personal North Dakota GOP credentials, and then simply giving it up to somebody who hadn't been on the scene for a long time. Now, and I'm not saying I am not in any way, shape, or form saying he cheated. He did not. I think he ran, from what I can tell, his election with integrity. But I'd be very frustrated if I were Julie Fedorchak with the process not telling me, hey, what is the actual vote? That's not a diva request. That's not an out-of-the-line thing to ask for. That should be standard.
I think Julie's point and again, nobody's accusing Alex Balaz didn't do anything wrong. He didn't have, he was there, he showed up, he campaigned, all the chaos kind of happened. It wasn't his fault. To your point, everything I've seen for the Alex Balaz campaign, they're just running an honorable campaign. But they, I think Julie opted not to continue because everybody in that room was tired, and there was so much nonsense going on. She says, you know what? This doesn't really matter. I'm campaigning to June anyway. Let's just move on. And I think she won a lot. I mean, she won a big cheer when she announced that at the convention. I think it was the right move in that context, because what else does she do? Like, try to force a recount? How long is that going to take? I mean, the whole thing was a mess.
I mean, I'm sorry. You're running for a job where you're going to be part of a body of 435 people, and sometimes you do need to stay for the long-term nitty-gritty vote and get the right one, get the right count.
You are wrong about this. In that context, in that room, she made the right decision.
We'll see. We'll especially see when it comes to the primary too, because now she has so many opponents. There's so much blood in the water.
Yeah, that
this thing could get divvied out. I could still see a route for Rick Becker to get a simple plurality, not majority. And
I don't think any
candidate for Congress.
I don't think any of the candidates are going to get a plurality in a 5-way race. I think, but I mean, Rick Becker could definitely win. I think it helps.
You meant majority.
Yeah, nobody's going to get a majority. Yeah, well, I don't know what I said.
You said plurality, but you meant
Nobody's going to get somebody's going to get a plurality. Obviously, nobody's going to get a majority. Not with this many candidates in the race. Cara Mund I don't think can win this primary. I think she could probably peel enough votes away from Fedorchak to make Becker the winner. I think that's probably the most she could hope for, which again makes me wonder if you are in favor of moderate Republican leadership, what are you doing in that race? What are you trying to accomplish? I'm not real sure.
I'm confused. I don't know who Alex pulls from, or if does Alex even really register after having, again, won a nomination coming out of the blue, won it fair and square, working hard.
But he hasn't really done a lot since then. I mean, the winning, being the endorsed candidate, wins him a lot of mentions in articles, right? When I'm writing an article about that race, I have to mention that Balazs is the convention endorsed candidate, because he is.
Which you should, by all rights. Right. Because he is. When he presented his cakes, right. it was a, whether I agree with it or not, it was an extremely professionally done campaign, biography, presentation. And I will also say, I felt like I knew exactly who he was and why he wanted to run for office when I got done with it. There are some candidates that are good people that just aren't great at and I would say he was.
He's got a coherent message. My only knock on Alex Balazs is he's come out of nowhere. He doesn't have a voting record, and he's asking to be our only vote in the House of Representatives. That's a tough sell for me. I very much like somebody like Fedorchak, who's been around for a while. She's got a governing track record. She's a known quantity. Even Rick Becker is a known quantity. Cara Munn ran last cycle. She's even a little bit more of a known, even though she doesn't have a governing track record. She's even a bit of a more of a known quantity than Alex Balazs, who literally came out of, well, not literally, but figuratively, came out of.
I would say Tammy Miller's almost in that same category, a little bit to her own fault for not being as out there as she could be as a candidate. She is lieutenant governor. Now, through no fault of her own, you don't sponsor bills when you're lieutenant governor. You oversee the Senate, and really, truly, you only oversee, the only time your vote would make a difference is if there's a tie. And through no fault of her own, not a ton of ties in the North Dakota State Senate. But then I wish we could see more of her out there. I wish we could ever hear, to our point with our first guest, what would you like to do for the state of North Dakota? And I don't want to hear oppose Joe Biden, because supposedly your endorsed candidate, Donald Trump, is going to get rid of Joe Biden. So that's not something you're going to do. Supposedly he's going to be gone by the time you're governor. So what are you going to do, Tammy Miller?
Well, according to her campaign,
Armstrong as governor of the state of North Dakota.
According to her campaign, she's just going to do whatever Donald Trump tells her to do, I guess.
What a worthless thing. What happened? There's no point if you can vote.
Although if I'm going to launch that criticism at Tammy Miller, all the Republicans have their hands dirty when it comes to that. I do want to say that I really appreciated. So Kelly Armstrong was on Meet the Press recently, and it was in the context of, he was being asked about the drama around Speaker Mike Johnson, because Marjorie Taylor Greene, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Moscow Marge, as some people like to call her, is threatening to, or well, in fact, she's going to. I guess next week she's gonna call a vote or move, I guess, whatever she
didn't get enough attention last week, so she's gonna scream and yell next week. So she's
gonna move to oust the speaker. Democrats, to their credit, have announced that they're gonna back Speaker Johnson, and I think to me that's an act of civic hygiene. That's an act of, listen, we're gonna be adults about this, which was exactly what. So Kelly Armstrong was on Meet the Press being interviewed by the host, and the host said, well, you voted against the funding for Ukraine. Armstrong did vote for the funding for Israel and Taiwan, but he voted against the Ukraine funding, which, by the way, I didn't like. I didn't agree with that vote at all. But basically, he said, well, you disagreed with Speaker Johnson about Ukraine. Why are you still supporting him for speaker? And Armstrong said, because I'm a grown-up. And I loved that answer so much, because it's such a recognition of what politics is supposed to be, which is not getting everything you want. It's working with the people you disagree with to get something that you can live with.
It's sad to me, and it's not to take away from your point. I agree with your point, and I agree, and I agree with your opinion on what Kelly is saying about Speaker Mike Johnson. I think it's sad that I think if you rewound the clock 20 years, what he said in this interview would have been standard and not notable. And that's not a criticism of him, but it is a critique of the times that basic the basic functionality of like, hey, can you walk into chew gum? Are you a multitasker? Do you know a little bit about the Constitution? Basic things we expected from our Congress people, we certainly can't expect from the folks like Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Well, prior to Kevin McCarthy being outed, that had never happened before in American history. So, I mean, the fact that we're having to, to applaud Kelly Armstrong for saying something that would have been obvious 10, 15 years ago is a sign of the times, because we've never been in this situation before where a small fractious minority is forcing this stuff. It is,
and this is what you get with the politics of name calling and a race to the bottom, where you say that everyone's a dirty politician or you're a horrible trial, whatever label you want to apply. When you take out the nuance and say it'd be better if we blew it all up, here's the result. It's actually not better. You might not like Tim Johnson as a speaker. And by the way, I don't particularly care for almost any policy he's going to put forward. I shouldn't say all, but a majority of them I'm not going to agree with. I just don't. But if you're constantly replacing the Speaker of the House, at some point, there is a stability for the American economy. There is a risk to national security with the functionality of basic funding for the military, in addition to making us look weak to people who would oppose us from abroad. That is not helping any average citizen who feels left out.
Right.
That the hucksters who run on those things are promising when they do that.
People, and I'm not trying to blow up the point you're making at all, but people complain all the time about name calling and everything else. Listen, I mean, I started off this little part of our discussion by referring to Marjorie Taylor Greene as Moscow Marge. I guess that's name calling. I don't have a problem throwing sharp elbows. I am a practitioner at times of the art of the polemic. So I don't have a problem with sharp elbows and everything else. What I have a problem with are people who think, I lost the vote, so now I'm going to remove the Speaker of the House. Or I lost an election, so now we're going to try to overturn the election by blocking Congress from certifying it. That's the attitude that I have a problem with. I mean, I don't have a problem with bare knuckle politics. Sometimes this stuff, we're all passionate about it. And I don't, name calling, okay, maybe it's not a great thing. But that's not really the problem. It's beside the point. The problem is people who can't accept the way democracy is supposed to function. They think that if they lose, that somehow the process is rigged. And that's just not accurate.
And that makes a lot of sense. And my plea to voters is to not reward the attention seekers. And I know it's a boring prescription, right? It's the old, like, hey, how are you gonna lose weight? A very boring regime of diet and exercise over the course of many, many months. It's not a sexy answer. It's a boring answer that takes a lot of dedication. You have to read a lot. You have to dedicate yourself a lot. But actually, I won't go too far into it because my point is not to go too far into it. Kristi Noem, governor of South Dakota, has made a lot of headlines lately for writing a book where she supposedly literally shoots a dog. And I am listeners of the podcast will know this because they pay attention to political news. I sighed watching online my fellow lefties and others all dutifully going to their keyboards and posting, one, how outraged they were, and then two, starting to do some joke memes about Old Yeller and marked my dog as safe from Kristi Noem, ha ha ha. Because you know what? You look at that, honestly, I give it a 50-50 she even did that. I think she sat down with a publisher and said, what can get me the most attention for being the most trolly right now? Because it's self-reported. It's in her own book, and then it was leaked to the Guardian. There wasn't an investigative reporter. These people want to outrage you and get clicks, which you are providing them, not you and I, not everybody. But a lot of people think that they are helping by magnifying and sharing and resharing. And I think it'd be better. So I'm going to try and walk the walk now instead of just talking the talk. Everyone should go and listen to Kelly Armstrong's fun, I'll call it a rant, but I actually really like it, about AM radios being in cars. He has it's on his Twitter page. You can just go on his congressional page. It's in the last day or two. And he talks about how AM radios need to be in cars because it's the best way of getting communication out in rural areas like the state of North Dakota for weather reports. And he talks about public broadcasting. And he's darn right. You know what? It's a boring issue. It's an issue about mandating AM radios being in cars against Tesla's desire. He is absolutely correct. and I hope everyone looks it up. So I'm going to try and be part of the solution I'm asking for by advertising someone being in the weeds and doing something boring that is correct.
Well, there's plenty of conservative talk radio hosts too that definitely don't want AM radio to go away. And there's plenty of public radio enthusiasts who don't want it to go away either. And I think he happens to be right on that issue.
And there's a lot of farmers that get their weather report off of the AM radio and are driving long distances where they don't have cell service, where AM radio
and don't have
necessity.
And also can't tune in an FM station either.
There are also areas on tribal land that don't get great Wi-Fi reception that need AM radio.
Yeah.
See, again, it sounds boring and it sounds like a bumpkin thing to do, except for when there's an actual tornado that one time and you really did need that.
That's hard. I mean, in a lot of ways, being able to tune into AM radio when, the lights go out or something is very important. So there is all that. As far as the Kristi Noem thing, it is scary to me because you're right. I don't know if she actually killed this dog or not. I'm willing to take her word for it if she's going to tell me that. I don't have a reason to doubt it. I don't know why.
I'm not.
I don't know why she'd lie about it. But you're right. I mean, maybe it's a story she's making up, but in some way that's worse. Like if she's making something up because she thinks that murdering a puppy for being a puppy is going to appeal to her to a political constituency that can help her become Donald Trump's running mate. That is terrifying to me. And the thing is, let's zoom out a little bit. You should Google, and I wrote about this. I wrote about this in the context of speaking about sort of gross careerism, Doug Burgum's efforts to, ingratiate himself with Donald Trump, which my headline was, it's kind of like watching your friend try meth. It's scary.
Hi, Kristi Noem in there. Like the South Dakota campaign meth, we're on it. We're getting to that point with
there's a joke in there somewhere. I'm not talented enough to make it. But they have the thing about Google. There's a New York Times article about Kristi Noem's mega makeover, where she's doing her hair.
Literally a makeover.
It sure looks to me like she has plastic surgery. She's doing her makeup different. She got infamously got her teeth done. It's not on me to comment. Most people comment on how politicians, particularly female politicians, dress and look, and that bothers me sometimes. And women get held to a different standard. But there's no question that Kristi Noem, I think the dog story is part of it. I think the way she's dressing, the way she's doing her makeup, the way she's doing her hair, I think that's part of it. It is almost sociopathic, the way she is trying to shoehorn herself in to be this. And it's gross. Like, nobody who wants power that badly should have power. And if she miscalculated on the dog story, that backfired with the mega movement. And there's a part of me that's like, thank goodness, because if that became like, if murdering your dog became like part of like a good move for career advancement in mega world, we'd better get the National Guard out to protect humane societies. Because that's a scary thing. I'm glad that she received, sort of universal backlash. Although it is kind of weird, like the same people who think that the people who violently attacked Congress on January 6th are unbelievable patriots, but don't you murder that puppy.
Backlash.
I'm not in favor of puppy murdering. I'm also not in favor of watching a member of the Washington, D.C. police get beaten on the top steps of the Capitol.
Or killed. And by the way, so speaking of that backlash, I'll go a step darker. Could that not be part of it? If you were Donald Trump and you saw a loyal foot soldier in Mike Pence for 8 years, in his mind, betray him and not allow him to take that election, and you look at Kristi Noem facing all this backlash and her not backing down, you think to yourself, yeah, she's willing to go to the mat no matter what. Maybe this is the kind of material the kind of loyalty I require.
Maybe it works out for her. I don't know. Maybe it works out for her. And
think about this. Would either of us be talking about a book Kristi Noem put out if she hadn't self-reported a controversial thing?
Have you read many political biographies? Because I've read several of them. They are boring.
Autobiographies.
Especially. Oh no, I mean like a political biography that like
Robert Carroll puts out is great, but
right, like that's different. Like I'm talking about like the ones that the politicians themselves put out.
Yeah, the sort of emotional 200-page tomes that someone else wrote for them.
Are boring. And trust me, any juicy anecdote that might be in there is going to be reported by the New York Times, the Washington Post, or in this case, the Guardian. It's going to be reported anyway. You don't need to buy these books.
Speaking of imitating or making yourself over for the president in the Veep stakes, to your point about Doug Burgum, I saw this morning there was a tweet he put out saying the Republican Senate candidate in Wisconsin has my full and complete endorsement. And I'm just going, Doug, no one in Wisconsin was sitting there with bated breath wondering, should I vote for Tammy Miller again? Oh, Doug Burgum endorsed the candidate. This is all of this is window dressing to be a VP.
Yeah.
It's so naked.
Do you think it's weird? Have you noticed that when sort of the MAGA Republicans endorse, they're all emulating how Trump does it? Where they're always saying my full and complete endorsement. I was when Rick Becker in the House campaign was releasing a bunch of Freedom Caucus people who were endorsing him, Matt Gaetz and Bob Good and some of these people. They were all saying the same thing. Like, Rick has my full and complete. Like, it was like they were copying. It was like it was Mad Libs, but they were copying it. But it was always like that. My complete and total, my full. Like, they're all just emulating Donald Trump, and which again makes me gross. Like, this is America. Like, we fought a war so we didn't have to worship our leaders and like emulate them and stuff like that. Stop it. Like, stop the sort of cult-like. I mean, even if you like Donald Trump, like. I mean, it's everything from Kristi Noem trying to look like Melania Trump to, Doug Burgum emulating the way Trump talks and everything. Stop it. Be your own person.
And, I'm a pretty big dork. I read a lot of presidential history, a lot of 1900s American political biographies. I can't find another place, I don't think, where candidates emulate, like, verbal tics that, like, I don't think there at any point in the 80s, any Republicans in like 82, 84 were repeating specific lines. That, I mean, like, they might have said it's morning in America again because that was Reagan's tagline for his campaign. They wanted part of that.
It's different.
But that's different, though.
It's different from quoting somebody that you admire. Like, I admire Ronald Reagan. I'm going to quote some of the things he said because I think he was right.
And honestly, I don't think like Republican congressional candidates in like Northern South Dakota came out in 82 and 84 and said, I'm running for office because it's morning in America. I think they came out and said, I want to talk to you about how we trade wheat with Russia. Let's get into North Dakota ag issues and farm bill issues. Here's why whatever. I can't find an analogous historical phenomenon in the last century to that. And maybe I'm just missing something, but I really can't, on the Democrat or Republican side, I can't think of folks in the 90s or even Obama era where Democrats coming out and was like, I'm running. They might have ran to be the Hope and Change candidate in blue districts in 08. But
and
I think they maybe sent that and then dropped it. I don't know.
There's something distinct between when Democrats or Republicans or libertarians or whoever, when, in a certain moment of time, a lot of their messaging is going to sound alike. And that's not the same thing as I'm going to emulate like the sort of the idiosyncrasies of the way Donald Trump speaks and or the way he writes or the way he likes his women to look, I guess.
And there's no and by the way, if you're going to pick there's not a lot of great rhetorical flourishes to copy from Donald Trump because the man kind of has a 200-word vocabulary, but the total and complete endorsement also is a rhetorical flourish that doesn't make any sense versus your 70% endorsement versus your half-hearted endorsement. You either endorse or you don't. This is pretty binary.
And it's like 70 being like a little bit. I mean, it's a tautology. Like total and complete mean the same thing. You don't need to say them both.
Yeah, I want to maybe leave off, unless you have other things with this. I am a little worried looking at Tammy Miller's campaign's rhetoric, which is clearly based around polling. Clearly they found that people who they don't have a high opinion of lawyers. And most people don't have law degrees. The majority of Americans don't have bachelor degrees. And so there's that, us versus the elites rhetorical argument I think she's inserting there. But I think the conversation that I'm seeing, I'm being very broad here, established Republicans having about the Miller campaign is extremely similar to the May 2016 conversations they were having about Stenjum versus Burgum. And let's not forget, and I feel like it's been memory hold in this state, Doug Burgum spent millions of dollars in his campaign to run ads directly implying that Wayne Stenjum was in favor of Obamacare, which isn't true, and claiming things like he was going to balance a budget in the state, which, of course, the state is constitutionally mandated to do, and the North Dakota state had a balanced budget. but he didn't suffer consequences for that. He won the nomination. He was a 2-term governor. Yeah. So is there really not the possibility for Miller to take the exact same route, be laughed at by the establishment come election day, put everybody in their place?
Well, the difference is that Kelly Armstrong is not Wayne Stenjum. It's also not 2016 anymore. And I think a lot of what had, wind in the sails of Doug Burgum is that he was an outsider candidate in 2016 when it was, the year Trump won. The thing is a lot of the people who very much like the outsider stuff and all that don't like Doug Burgum. I mean, you look at where you roll up on a booth where they're collecting signatures for the anti-property tax measure, and they're gonna have a picture of Doug Burgum. This picture, in fact, I wrote about it at one point, but they have a picture of like Doug Burgum's like a marionette being controlled by Bill Gates. Miller, I think, is having a hard time competing, and she's just not going to attract those people. So it's a much different environment. Armstrong's a much different candidate. I don't think that's going to happen.
I think Kelly, I agree with you that Kelly's more aggressive, but at the time, Wayne Stenjum had been putting up north of 70% stats on statewide elections for 16 years, and he had 90% approval ratings, and he got absolutely
But that's also because
he was in favor of Obamacare, which is something he couldn't write and couldn't vote on.
Yeah, that's also because, particularly at the end of his career, he wasn't exactly running against the best and brightest that Democrats could put forward. He didn't really have a lot of very competitive races that really made him work for it. Doug
Would we say that Kelly Armstrong has fought his way through extremely tough Democrat competition?
Max Schneider.
I mean to throw my friends under the bus. I think that's the partisan slant where the state's at. I don't think it has anything to do with Max Schneider, to be very honest. I think in a 50-50 state, I don't know how Kelly and Mac would have fared. I actually don't. For real, I don't.
Yeah.
Because Kelly's an aggressive, smart candidate. I just don't know.
I don't think that Tammy Miller's going to shock the world. But who knows? We'll find out on election day. That's why we hold the votes. We're going to put a pin in it there. Thank you so much for listening. Certainly appreciate it. I don't think we're going to have a podcast on Friday. You may have read in the newspaper. I may have to testify at trial on Friday. I'm not really at liberty to talk a lot about it. I'm sure most of you have probably read those articles. But that may be, so if we don't have a podcast on Friday, there's still a possibility that I might not have to testify. So I don't know. And by the way, if I do testify, I'll be testifying about this podcast. So I won't be able to, if I'm not doing a podcast Friday, it's because I have to be in court talking about this podcast.
So watch what I say around you is what I'm.
Well, what you say. No, it's
I'm kidding.
It's just, we did a very good interview with State Representative Doctor. A lot of the things that he said in that interview are apparently pertinent to this case, and they want to get the podcast into evidence. And I may have to be there, I guess, to testify to the foundation of the podcast being its creator, I guess. So
you could always have Chad and I take over as dual guest hosts with no interviewee. So we drive the podcast so far into the ground, you'd never have to face anything like this again. It's an option.
Not going to do that. Not going to choose that option. I'm going to choose something else. And I'm also going to choose to end this podcast right now. Thank you so much for listening.